Yo, what's good? It's Bear in the building. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Kueen Talk. If you are new here, welcome. Make sure that like button, subscribe button, leave a comment. Let us know what you think of the episodes. Yes, make sure to check out queentalk.com. Get yourself some merch. Treat yourself with some Kueen Talk merch. We got a very special guest today, you guys. This guest moved from Southern California to Kansas 6 years ago in search of a new beginning. After pushing through a difficult past and the impact of COVID, they have rebuilt their life through art and community. Today, Ramon is a published poet, visual artist, workshop facilitator, and even has been featured on a PBS Kansas music video. I know that's right. Welcome, Ramon Fonseca. Welcome. How you
Thank you.
doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Kansas,
Thank you.
been here for a while, but from Southern California.
Yeah.
What put Kansas on the map for you?
Yeah, very good question. I get that a lot. I had sort of a lot of different things come together for me to come here. But the main one was that I have some family here. I didn't really know them very well, but my uncle reached out to me during a time where I was really struggling to figure out how I was going to pursue my future. And he invited me to come see all the major colleges in Kansas. And thanks to PSU, I was able to get my FAFSA done. I had stuff going on with my financial aid because I was in a situation where my parents couldn't fill out their portion. And so WCU was able to help me with a special circumstance. And so I got money to go to school, and that's what brought me here.
Okay, let's talk about that special circumstance. 'Cause I'm sure someone might be going through the same thing, and you actually work in this field as well. Like, you help people now get their FAFSA. What was the situation for you that your parents couldn't do it, so you had to?
Yeah, so I was homeless most of my childhood. I think maybe twice in my life we had stable housing, and it never lasted a year. So because of that, my parents didn't do taxes. We didn't have even a permanent address to tie to the FAFSA. And during that time, it was really difficult to get that overridden to be able to fill it out without taxes or without an address. And even though there was a way to override it, I had no clue how to go about that. And nobody was in my high school, and when I graduated, nobody was really curious enough to help me. I had a 4.2 GPA in high school. So I think all of my teachers assumed that I would just be fine and go off to college. But the reality was I had no clue what I was supposed to do. I didn't know how to get money or anything like that. So honestly, it was kind of just luck and the curiosity of someone at WSU that was able to get me a special circumstance request.
Yeah, shout out resources.
For real.
You mentioned that you were homeless in your childhood, yet you had a 4.2 GPA. What was your upbringing like in Southern California then? What was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was I went through a lot of trauma, and a lot of my upbringing was it was very unstable, which I think comes with being homeless, But I was also in an abusive household, very homophobic, very awful household. And I think for me, school was an escape from that. So, even though school was rough at times too, because I was getting bullied and whatever, I felt that if I went to school and did my best, that it would afford me an escape out of that situation. So yeah, I think that's a lot of what helped me keep my grades up, for sure.
Most definitely. How did you get connected then with the resource, your uncle and stuff like that here in Wichita?
Yeah, so the family here is on my mom's side. And even though I never really talked to them or didn't really know them growing up, they would still send letters and stuff in the mail to our PO box that we had. And so I kind of knew my uncle vaguely because of that. He reached out to me during a time where I was actually living in LA, and he got my email somehow. But I think I mentioned to one of my aunts, who I was kind of closer to, talked to regularly, that I was really unsure of what to do. And he reached out because of her. But he asked if I would come and visit Wichita. And at the time I was living in LA in another situation, which maybe we can get into later. But, I was like, well, I kind of hate where I'm at right now. Might as well try it. Let me go meet this like person I've never met before who's my uncle and see what's up.
Had you been anywhere before that, like even out of California?
No, no. I think, well, I went to Arizona once, but it was like a brief road trip. But other than that, I hadn't really left California.
What after you got out of school? You said LA. There was a situation in LA. Did you like move to LA by yourself? Like, did you escape your parents? Did you like? How was that relationship with your parents? Like, I know you said it's abusive, but like,
Yeah. Well, so, the last 4 years of my high school experience, I was living in a trailer with my parents in the back of some dude's house. And during that time, like, I was starting to build a friendship with someone I met at Starbucks. When you're homeless, like, you usually go to Starbucks or the libraries, these third places where you go to escape to out of the summer heat and whatever. But I made this friendship and I was starting to, uh, with them, deconstruct what I was going through. For the longest time, I didn't realize I was getting abused because
mm,
truly all I knew. I didn't have any friends outside of school. Like, I was very insular because of the way my parents like kept us very. My dad kept us very secluded. But with this friendship, I started realizing like, oh, this situation kind of sucks. And so I started kind of like getting a little braver with exploring my individuality,
mm,
let alone my sexuality. But when I was 17, I came home with my friend's boyfriend at the time. And my parents had decided that day that they were like suspicious that I was gay, which like they weren't wrong. But my dad, like, for whatever reason, that was his like kind of final straw. So we like got really upset, chased me around with a log, like kicked me out of our little trailer. Um, and my friend's family took me in for the next 2 years. So yeah, at 17, I was kicked out for being the suspicion of being gay. And I ended up living with this family who took me in, who was far more accepting of me, allowed me to express who I was, and allowed me to explore myself. And around this time was when Musically switched to TikTok. And this is
mm,
important, tangential story that becomes part of it. So for a year, I'm like exploring who I am, starting to explore my sexuality and my gender identity. And I also start exploring the concept of finding community in that through
mm,
TikTok. For me, TikTok was a way to start to explore like other people like me and interact with them and see what that was like. And through TikTok, I met this guy who was doing like cringe content at the time, who like was really interested in what I was doing on TikTok, which was like partially cringe content, partially like me just exploring who I was, gender stuff, and doing a lot of makeup videos. And after a year of talking, he asked me to come move out to LA with him. So, I leave the house situation, I graduate high school, I'm living with this other family for a couple years. And then after 2 years, I move out to LA with this man. Strange man. He was um, 29 at the time and I was 19.
oh gosh,
Also an interesting age dynamic. But yeah, I lived with him for a year in LA, and then I realized that I was getting abused again, which a lot of abuse victims end up in the same situation again. Statistically, it's just a thing that happens. But yeah, after a year was when I realized like I really needed to change things. And I think I emailed my aunts during this time when I was living in LA being like, I hate this and I wish I could have a future, some
mm,
dramatic thing. And my uncle reached out and I finally, after like getting hit, I was like, you know what? I don't want to relive this cycle. And I will take
mm.
the big risk flying halfway across the country to see if I can pursue some semblance of a better future.
Yeah, man, Ramon, you've been through a lot. You've been through a lot. I'm glad you made it to Kansas and you've found a way to get here. That's so much that in just such a short period of time. Like, there's
Mhm.
so much to unpack, and I'm like, okay, where do I start? And like the household that you were raised in, for you to have to you literally got chased out by a log in your house. I'm so sorry that was your experience. When you look back over all the stuff that you have gone through, and like now you express yourself like art, you say that that art and community has like rebuilt you. I like when I was looking stuff up, like art is how you, I feel like yours escape now. That's how you express yourself. When did that start coming into your life of navigating through your emotions through your art,
Great.
finding a way to express yourself?
Yeah. Well, my first real experience with art is poetry. I've been writing poetry since I was in elementary school. And, while I was going through all these traumatic things in my young adulthood, I was writing a lot. And writing became more than just an expression of art. It became a way for me to process my trauma and process my emotions and figure out how to address that stuff. And I think now, as an active artist, a working artist, exploring all these other mediums, art has become a way for me to not just explore trauma, but to explore my identity and to explore like how to give other people the support that I didn't get when I was younger, or at least the feeling of being seen.
Mhm.
Most of my childhood, I did not feel seen. I felt like I was very alone. And so going into art and being active in the community was my attempt at trying to prevent that in other kids like me and other people like me.
When you were doing, you said at a young age, at 8 is like when you started poetry. And then do you sing too? I heard you like sing in a video and I was like, okay, does
Oh no.
this, are you like gonna be a musician too? Or are you like trying to?
I like to say that I am a jack of all trades and a master of some. I have 12 years. I also was a musician since elementary school. I played the trumpet for 12 years. I played it a little bit in WSU's symphony orchestra before COVID hit. And music has always been a very integral part of my life. Even after COVID hit, when I couldn't play in an orchestra or band, I started taking vocal lessons. So singing became my way to connect with music. But yeah, I do a little singing every now and then.
Yeah, and because you did come here and then COVID hit, right?
Yeah.
Or was it the like COVID hit and then like you came here?
No, I came here in, I want to say late 2019. So like fall semester of 2019. And so it was right before COVID hit. I got almost a full semester before COVID hit of college. And then it hit.
Had you been hearing about it in California at all before you came down here?
No, it wasn't even, I think it was, um, yeah, it was here that I learned about COVID. I don't
Okay.
think it was even talked about at the time.
I'm thankful that you made it here and you were dealing with that here in Kansas and not in your situation that
Yeah. I don't know what would happen, truly. Like, I think about that every now and then. Like, I'm thankful that I ended up coming here and figuring things out in a like safer space than what I was. But honestly, it was like really hard for me. Because I moved here alone with like 2 suitcases of stuff, right? And I'm living in the dorms. And, my first year of college was actually probably one of the best times in my life. It feels a little like cliche to be like, yeah, college was great, but um
I had a lit time in college. Like,
it's great. It
yes.
really is. You get this like built-in forced upon you community.
Hmm.
Like you're surrounded by people who are all at the same stage of life as you. And so you explore with this sort of equal playing grounds in a way that was very unusual for me, or very it was just very new. And I feel like it was the first time that I felt calm in a long time and normal. But for COVID to hit after a semester of like getting this feeling of normalcy and empowerment and confidence was really, really scary for me. Especially because I didn't have a home to go back to. When
Right.
they closed down the dorms because of COVID. And for any students who were not international students, they had to leave the dorms. They had to either go back home or figure something out. So I was then forced to figure out how to live on my own for the first time, which was pretty daunting.
So that's when you got an apartment by yourself for the first time or a
Yeah.
house? Okay. What was that dynamic for you? Like trying to,
Well, I during my first semester of college is when I started connecting with my family a little bit here. So, like I started meeting a couple more of my uncles, my aunts, and whatever. And at one point, like, I moved here without a car, right? One of my uncles gave me a car. It was like an old 1999 Ford Bronco. And, I had plenty of experience picking stuff up and going, So
Yeah.
when I was told I need to get out of the dorms, I went, all right, let me pack up. I put everything in my car. And then I was like, let me figure something out. Around that time, I think is when we got our first stimulus checks when I had
Mm.
to like leave. So I had the immense luck of just having the deposit for an apartment. I ended up staying with one of my friends who I made here for a week, I think. And then I found a listing for an apartment in Riverside. It was the first apartment that I looked at, and I wanted it because it had a balcony. Honestly. But I came and looked at it and I went, good enough for me. And I signed the contract and that was it. So, yeah.
You picked a good neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's that's a good one. It is. You say just like you're just so used to picking up and going. And now this this is probably like the last 5 years of your life, like being able to just stay still. Um, a little bit. How do you? We've mentioned like art is like a way that you get through this. I'm just like, how do you like fight this resiliency like of yours? Just because like this has been so much. Like it's so much that you've gone through, and I'm sure someone on the platform or someone on a listener has probably similar situations. Like maybe with their family, they may be having to figure it out on their own. Like where does this resilience come from? Like with you?
You know, I think it's a really good question. I've found that I think a big part of my resilience comes from my parents, ironically enough. I mean, my dad was in the Air Force. He's like a veteran and he was also an engineer. And so I feel like I learned a lot of life skills from him that helped me be resilient. Even though he was the cause for a lot of our chaos, he always found a way to figure something out so that we were never hungry. At the very least, we always ate something. And that usually meant a whole lot of like, let's figure out a way to make money. Do we have a yard sale in the middle of this random guy's backyard? Do we like go out and find some odd job in another city? Whatever it was. I think my resilience comes from a sort of radical acceptance of things. I think because my whole childhood was a lot of turbulence and a lot of change, it made me a lot less fazed by those things. And so I find myself now sort of like, I think once like the changes started to chill out and stop, I found myself sort of confronted with like, oh, well, now there's not a lot of chaos. What do I do? But yeah, I think that's where a lot of my resilience comes from.
And now what do you do? Like how do you feel now that it is still you're making progress, obviously, like you're a published poet. Like how do you feel now that it is like for the first time you don't have any chaos?
You know, find a lot of, I have sort of like two feelings about it. One is I struggle with depression, chronic depression, whatever. And sometimes I have to practice like really intent mindfulness when it comes to that because I realize a lot of it just comes from literally the physical reduction of stimuli. But on the other side, I found so much peace. Like I feel like I've illustrated it best in my recent art show. I had an installation at Harvester Arts called The Wound. And it's inspired by this quote, which is my favorite quote of all time by Rumi. And the quote is, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." I have this philosophy that, we as individuals, especially queer people, especially people of color, especially people who are poor, whatever, people who experience some level of the hardships of the world. We go through a lot of trauma and we're confronted with this decision of like what to do with it. I think a lot of people get traumatized and become resentful. And I think part of it is valid. Resentment can help you protect yourself from further trauma, right? But I've kind of taken the approach of like, I've gone through a lot of trauma. I've lived a lot of rough lives, and I've sort of decided to choose to accept the things that I've gone through and focus on what I can do next. So it's a lot of looking to like, yeah, things are rough right now. Like if I'm struggling with bills, for example, but I still have amazing people in my life. I know that I can get through whatever this hardship is. And if it's really hard and can't get my mind off of it, guess what? I can always write. I can always create something. I can always reach out for help. So yeah, I think that like my life now looks a lot like just enjoyment, just
Yeah.
finding ways to enjoy and live normally.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up at the beginning a good point. Just because you've gone through it doesn't mean you're through it. I think you still, the depression that comes with it. Um, and it's important to find those resources, those healthy avenues like your poetry that you're doing, like the artistry, the music, and expressing yourself and really connecting with community. I think you've done a great job at that of just like staying connected. Like, of course, you know how to adapt to things, but just like moving to a whole different state and finding your ground in the community, I think is a great job on you. I think it's because especially it's hard to come to a new state and then find where you fit in. I think, and with you, like the way that you express yourself, you don't hide from it now. Although, like what you've went through at the beginning of your life, now you're openly about your identity and like you express yourself, like even through your clothing, like your fashion, and what got you to be like, of course, like you're an artist, like, right? So like clothing and stuff that comes with it, but just when did you realize, okay, like I'm going to express this gender as who I am and as this queer Latino, and I'm going to express all of this in me unapologetically?
I think I had sort of two phases of it because I think the first time that I felt safe and comfortable expressing myself or exploring my identity was when I moved in with my friend's family after I got kicked out. My friend ended up dating a trans person, and it was my first experience with a trans person, like I'm interacting with them. And at first I was nervous because I grew up in a household where we were taught all sorts of horrible things about queer people. But I learned that, a little bit of makeup can be the most freeing thing. And I learned that a lot of my fears about queerness were fears about being honest with myself. And it was thanks to Sasha, the amazing trans woman that entered my life, that I was able to be honest with myself. So I started exploring makeup with her, and I started buying dresses, and I started, going outside looking like that and not being afraid to be looked at. And, she showed me that it was possible to
Yeah.
be that. So yeah, there's that. She allowed me to be myself. And I think now the confidence that I have in self-expression, and in my artistry, a lot of it comes from, I mean, a big part of it is luck. I have had amazing luck of having some phenomenal people take interest in me and enter into my life who have allowed me to perceive the world differently, to see different perspectives. But when I was dealing with living on my own for the first time and whatever, for a couple of years I was like living pretty secluded because of COVID. But Delilah Reed, who is a local artist, because she had just opened a storefront and I was looking for an art job. I was tired of working for Starbucks and whatever other jobs I was doing, but it was because of Delilah Reed, and Anthony Joyner, another artist in town. He owns Mulberry Art Gallery. It was because of them that I was able to actually explore, and feel like confident in, my self expression, because they really empowered me to view, uh, art and the art world in a different way. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's shout out to Anthony and Delilah
Delilah.
Reed. Shout out to community, Wichita community. When you do get connected, though, like they are very welcoming. I think so.
Mhm.
Like you made a couple points, so like you mentioned like being bullied earlier on in your life, being visually seeing trans until a trans person until like later in your teens. When I think of California, I think of very progressive, very welcoming, But even in a place like that, you still were kind of worried about expressing yourself. Do you feel like it was more of just like what was going on the inside of your home than the outside, or do you feel like it was a mixture of both? And part two of that, like, how did you feel like moving to Kansas and expressing yourself versus California?
Yeah. Well, something I like to remind people is California is still part of America. And, California is a far more progressive place than a lot of the rest of the US. But California is also full of rich people, and rich people canonically are not the most progressive and accepting. I would say, like, I had an interesting upbringing because I do feel I grew up in a period of time in America where it was a lot safer for queer people to express themselves. And I had the privilege of going to high school at a place where there were plenty of queer people in the school that were out and open. We even had our fencing club had a furry as the mascot. Like, that's wild as it
Dang.
was. So, there was that. But I also lived in a city that was heavily conservative. Like, we were red in this map of
Mhm.
blue. And even though the high school was a safe and accepting place for the most part, the city was not. And it was still kind of dangerous to go out and be in high heels or anything like that. And I think I had the additional layer of, like, I did not feel safe in my own home. For the longest time, I didn't even admit to myself that I was gay. Like, not until I was maybe 16 did I say it to myself in my head, because I felt so. I mean, I was taught that it was the worst thing you could be. So it was a weird experience of seeing other people being themselves, being joyful, whatever, and being taught that what they were doing was going to ruin them, completely ruin them. I was taught I would go to hell if I was queer, all these things. And I think it was only my last year of high school that I really started challenging those beliefs because it was so rooted in me.
Yeah.
But I had to confront the fact that I was, like, not like other boys. Like, I really did. But I think, with that being said, finally getting out of the household allowed me to start to explore those concepts. But when I moved here, I'm not gonna lie, I was incredibly nervous. So I started exploring myself and you know, battling with my identity in a place where it was more progressive, even though the city was a little more conservative. Like, I could drive 30 minutes or an hour to Palm Springs. Here, you can't really escape, not that
Right.
easy. And something that I always share, the first thing that I noticed, the first time I felt like a culture shock was when I moved into the dorms. I remember looking out the window during time where classes was starting, and it was the first time I saw visual segregation. Like, there were only black people walking with black people, only Indians walking with Indians, only white people walking with white people. And though I lived in a conservative place, that my hometown was 60% Latino. I grew up in a high school where it was not possible to just have a group of friends with only one color. And I also didn't grow up in a household that looked like that. My family is incredibly mixed, and it was really jarring to see that,
Yeah.
for sure.
Wichita is very much so
Yeah.
segregated. It really, really is. It's funny that you say that, just because as an adult I see it a lot more than like when I was a kid. Because when I was younger, I lived in El Dorado, so when I came to Wichita, when you go to like a restaurant, you could be the only person of color in the in the restaurant, depending on like what side of town you're on. And it's
Mhm.
so weird. It's so weird. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, we're all spread out. Um, Even just like black people with Hispanics, like, we're still so spread out. Like, we don't even really connect sometimes. And then the queer spaces here are all very white.
Yeah.
We know we're out here, and it's like building a community with the queer people of color. That scene, like, what was it like in Cali, and your experience with like the queer people in Cali versus Kansas, Wichita?
Well, I didn't have the time, I think, to explore queer spaces as much in California because I was still nervous.
Right.
But I will say, I still only ever saw in public queer white people, really,
Yeah.
at least visibly queer. And the first time I went to a gay bar was in Riverside, California. Um, And actually, it was a lot of queer Latinos, a lot of cholas, which was pretty like, it was a wonderful first experience for sure.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
just about to ask you, like, seeing that, and then in the family dynamic that you're in, like, how did that help you, like, seeing and being in that environment for yourself?
I mean, it was so rewarding. I had never been in a space that was just full of queer people. And honestly, it scared the shit out of me. Like it
Yeah,
really did. I still had a lot of internalized homophobia at the time. At that point I was like, well, let me not act on that. But it was a real physical reaction. But I was met with, I was like, I think maybe 18 when I went to this bar. I was met with one of the most warm, welcoming environments. Like they found out that it was my first time at a bar, let alone a gay bar, and there was a drag queen performing at the time, and she brought me on stage and had me
yeah,
take a shot.
yeah,
It was not alcoholic, but a
yeah,
shot, whatever, and everyone applauded me, and everyone was so kind and loving and giving me hugs, and to have that sort of like intro into the
yeah.
community was incredibly impactful for me. Incredibly.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, of just like having that internal homophobia within yourself
Hmm.
because of just like everything that you've been told your entire life. You're trying to be in that community, like express yourself, but also like, wait, do I really want to express this just because of everything that you've been told in your past? I think also for me personally, it was kind of just like sometimes I get, if I think about it too much, I get scared of someone coming in and just like doing harm. Like if I think about it too much, I'm just like, okay, let's, is this like safe? Is someone gonna come in here and be crazy? Like, especially with like the times now, I'm just like anything, like even like with my events, like I used to like be public about like where the locations were. Now I'm just like being very mindful of only telling the people that are a part of it, like, hey, this is where it's at, without like spreading it. With that, do you ever have you ever had those like fears or think of that like when you're in those spaces as well?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, honestly, at the time, my first gay bar, I didn't, because it was, again, a time where I was like seeing the world and being like, well, this is like safe. It didn't feel like this overbearing weight.
Mm,
But having moved here and living here and seeing a lot of queer spaces close and a lot of political views change and a lot of change in our government, like it has manifested into real fears of being in those spaces. I mean, I don't think I've been to XY in over 2 years. And I think part of it too, like, and this is a whole other conversation, but like when I went to the gay bar in California, there were no straight people there. There just weren't.
yeah,
If they were
with the gay friend.
yeah, something. And coming here, I think the first year that I was here, it was still kind of like that when Boomerang was around, but now it's still just, I mean, the queer spaces here, I've been called a faggot inside of XY, like,
Wow.
and mind you, these are queer white spaces, so
Yeah, yeah.
it's not too shocking, I think. But it's not, no shade, but it's just, these spaces are not built by us for us, like they're money making spaces, and they cater a lot to the older white demographic here. So yeah, walking into queer spaces does make me still feel like worried.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's so interesting too, just like about how many, like when you go to XY, how many straight people are actually there. Which is
Mhm.
like it is, like we want you there as like allies, but when you come and take over, I just feel like then it's not no longer a gay bar.
Well, here's my take. Like, there's been discourse about this, I think, for the past couple of years of like, oh, there's too many straight people. Oh, well, we want to have a safe space, whatever, like there's totally valid argument to be said about like, yeah, of course we want straight people to feel comfortable coming here, because what if they discover something about themselves?
Hmm.
Or what if someone who is in the closet still wants to find a space where they can feel some semblance of community? Those things are important and valid. My thing is the culture of the space should be queer. And if the culture of the space is not queer, then that space is not like for gay people. You know what I mean? why we see more straight people going to bars like XY and stuff. Because the bar is not queer. It's not a queer space. It's a gay space. It's very different.
Mm. Okay. Okay. What
Yeah.
makes you think that about that it's not a queer space at XY?
Well,
Because I mean, everyone can throw in there and have the rainbows and stuff like that, which they
mhm.
do. But why do you think it's not a queer space? Like, what makes a queer space? Let's say that.
I think, and this is a very watered down, analysis, I think, but I think queer space is like, one, I want to hear queer music. And I don't mean Britney Spears, you
Or
know,
Lady Gaga.
no, no. I want to hear real queer music made by queer people. There
Mm.
are tons of queer people out there making music, or music that comes from queer spaces, like I don't ever hear anything like that. Hyperpop, I almost never hear in these spaces, and hyperpop is like an entire genre made by queer people. So I don't hear a lot of like queer music. I hear a lot of music that gay white men love. And, it's very different. And then I think too, like, I think about not me just calling out the bars, but like Jay's Lounge, for example. I think about how like I have had so many friends who have been made to feel uncomfortable in that space because some old white man wants to come up and be weird with them and fetishy or
Mm.
racist or whatever. And those spaces don't outwardly like push out those types of people.
Yeah.
Like, I think that queer spaces are spaces where, true queerness can be accepted and expressed, and people can come and feel safe in those spaces and know that they are with people like them. And I think queer spaces should be like expressions of queer art as well.
Yeah.
Like a queer space I think of in New York, for example, is the ballroom scene. Like, that's queerness. That's a
Yeah.
lot of, there's dance and there's joy and there's community and there's connectiveness. We don't really have that here in that way.
Yeah. No, I hear you when you say like what makes a. Because I'm trying to think. Because I don't go to XY often.
Mm,
And I don't go to like really any of the queer bars here often. Um, and it for me is because, like you mentioned, the music. I'm not into the music that they are like. That's not what I get down to. I think
mm.
it is. I've heard comments of just like we don't want that because we don't want to cater to a certain demographic as well.
Can I tell you, this is some tea, and you can choose to cut this out. I won't name names, but there's a DJ who's been doing DJing in Wichita for a while. I found them on Grinder one day, and I was like, why is the music ass? For lack of, shortened down. I was like, I want to hear this artist and this artist and this artist. Why don't I ever hear this and this? Why don't we play fucking Beyonce's Renaissance in this? I've never heard it in XY ever. That's a very. And his response was, well, we want to be selective of who we invite in these spaces. We don't want that demographic coming in here. Mind you, he's a white man,
Of course.
So, just to like jump off of what you said, like, yeah, it is very obviously that they don't want to cater to people of color,
Yeah.
truthfully.
Yeah, no, it is because you mentioned the queer people of color who are connected with these certain groups, and they feel like because they fit in, because they're welcomed, it's okay. Like, but and it's like they neglect their identity at the same time. And to be honest, like I used to be that way, just like being a black person coming from El Dorado, just like tapping into my identity was really hard. Like I had to put in work being where I'm from, intentionally trying to find the black spaces, intentionally trying to find queer people of color. You have to be intentional when you do that. But when you're content with like the groups, it's like, okay, I'm already fit in here, and they're not going to create a different dynamic because they'll get pushed out of there.
Right.
Like that's my why. Queen Talk, I realize that. I've seen it, I felt it, and queer people of color are in the Midwest and we need spaces for us. Like we need that. It's hard because we are so used to just being the minority in these spaces that a lot of people I realize are just okay with it. Like until I'm like, okay, I'm trying to create this space for you. I was intentional on who I sent out an invitation to Queen Time because I know like last year when I put it out to everybody, the people that came first were I want them a part of the building, but to build something, I need to go straight to the demographic that I'm trying to hit first, so they
Yeah.
see that. Otherwise, they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is just another white queer space," and I'm trying to do the opposite of that. Like I do want queer white people to be in this space too, but I also just, when queer people of color come in here, I want them to hear the music. I want them to feel the culture of them and see themselves in these rooms that they don't get often at all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to create here.
I love it. That's so important. I mean, I see you putting in the work. That's the thing. Like, I feel like a lot of people, and perhaps I'm guilty of it too, but a lot of people in the Midwest love to complain about these types of things. And the complaints are valid, but I hear a lot of complaints and not a lot of people doing stuff about it. And my attempts at that are going and making art and creating community my way. I'm curious to ask you a question. Like, if you had your way, if you had all the money in the world, what would queer spaces for you look like?
I would create like a 3-story building that had like a club level, a podcast studio level, and then just a chill hangout game session type level. And that's where I would host my meetups. Like this is where Kueen Talk would be, having different queer DJs throughout the months, curated events that tie into, maybe one is like an all black, all trans. Maybe one day is all Latina, all trans, Latina night, like hip hop night. I'm like, that is what I envision. And then, like, this is the space to be. Like, you're going to hear your music, you're going to feel the love and the community. That's what if I had all the money. And then the studio would be on the bottom. If you want to come and get a Kueen Talk session in, you can do that. And this, I don't want to limit anybody on telling their stories. I don't care who you are. You can tell your story on this platform if you are a queer person of color. Like, didn't want this a platform to just be like, oh, I'm just trying to reach the Queen Latifahs. Like, no. Even when I make it up there, like I still want to get everybody's story. I want as many stories out there. I feel like as many stories as are told can reach the younger generation to get this message out. And not even just the younger generation. I think with our cultures, like we have older people who are still scared to be themselves just because of how we were raised. So just reaching the demographics of all ages to see themselves, whether the aged demographic where you are, and just see themselves, like that's my goal. It's to just push. Yes, I'm pushing the agenda of be who you are, accept it, and find the community. Like that's what I would love. Then be just hanging out, gaming. Like, yeah, I would also like to set up like eventually a home, like a group home, just for
Mm,
youth that, a lot of queer youth get put out. So like branching off and eventually setting up that a community for that demographic as well. So yeah, there's a lot of ideas and things that I want to happen with Kueen Talk for sure.
I love that. I
Yes.
love that. We need it desperately. So I'm excited to see that in the future. I know
Yeah,
it'll.
definitely. We're starting with just renting out venues and creating these events, but we will build and we will grow for sure. Just because this is like something that I needed as a child too. Like I'm trying to heal my inner child as well, and this is my way of doing that. And with that, what are ways that everything that you've been through, how are you healing your inner childhood and everything that you have gone through?
Well, I go to therapy. So
Hey,
there's that. Yeah.
hey,
Been going to therapy for years and I highly recommend it. I know a lot of people, especially queer people of color, feel very nervous about therapy. I go to therapy, helps me at least have an outside perspective and process what I'm going through with an objective eye. But I also think a lot of my inner child is healed by, I think part of it is like, I've lived in the same apartment for the past 5 years. And in this space, I allow myself to put stuff on the wall and collect trinkets and stuff, something I was never allowed to do or even able to do growing up. I think a lot of that helps me with my inner child. I think on the other side, a lot of my inner child is healed by connecting with people through my art. My very first art show was in the Wichita Studio School gallery. And for that show, part of it was putting my poetry and some typography visual art on the wall and having people see that. But I actually had the show as a sort of like veiled way to do an open mic night for poetry. And so I had people come out and they shared their poetry. And I feel like having the privilege and ability to create spaces like that for people and to engage with people in that way, to express themselves through their poetry, that has been really healing for sure.
Yeah, and you host these poetry nights often. Like you create this, and like you mentioned before, it's like you're doing the work too, putting these events together. It's hard. That's hard work. Do you have an event that's coming up? Maybe what's in the works for you and the art and the poetry?
Well, so every first and third Thursday, I co host a poetry workshop or a writing workshop at the Advanced Learning Library.
Okay,
It's completely free. It starts at 6 p.m. Again, every first and third Thursday. So for me, that's something that's regularly happening, pretty stable stuff. And I love that. But there is another group I'm part of called Vortex Vessels. And every quarter, we do a show. We meet every Sunday at 6 p.m. and we do sort of like a longer type of workshopping where we read our poetry, give our critiques, things like that. And then I'm working on getting a poetry open mic night set up for teens.
nice.
So that's going to be in the works for sure. I'm going to create a space. There's really nothing out there for teens right now. And, I think that our youth really needs a place where they can explore themselves. So that's my goal.
For sure. If someone besides the first and third Thursdays of the month going to the Wichita Advanced Library, if someone wants to get involved, what's something that they can where's a start for someone? What would you recommend for someone
Mm.
trying to get involved to start? And maybe they may not be in Wichita
Sure. When it comes to poetry or like the art scene in general?
in general.
Okay. I think in general, my advice is one, to be curious. Ask questions, ask why things are happening, all that sort of stuff. That's how you find out what's happening and where, right? So be curious. But two, I would say start with your library and start with art galleries. If you just go on Google and look up art galleries in town, if you go to those galleries, you can ask people like, hey, what's happening in town? Where can I go to this and this? And from there, they'll find all sorts of resources. Something that I think is a luxury of Wichita is that the art community is pretty close knit. So there's a lot of crossover in different realms. And if you're looking for something specific, if you start at an art gallery, usually you'll be able to find your way to whatever you're looking for. So
Oh,
I'd say that's my best advice.
appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you so much, Ramon, for being on Queen Talk today. It's been a pleasure. Our conversation, your story, it's like I feel like there's so many layers. There's so many layers for us to unpack in just an hour. We just got the tip of the iceberg, but I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing what you did. I'm glad that you found the resources to make it here in Wichita. That shout out to Sasha for giving you that creativity, that expression to show yourself. Also, the family that took you in, because it's important to have those resources. And, you hear a lot of times where some a family friend or someone took someone in, so it doesn't have to end with you being put out. Like someone can pick you up and lift you up still, and you can push through. Like your resilience has shown through this episode, and continue to fight, continue to push for queer people of color, and you're doing great things with the poetry, the workshops. So keep expressing yourself, and don't dull your light. I think it's very important. When I seen you, I got excited just because of what you represent, just with your clothing expression. So it's like you make a statement when you walk into rooms, when you express yourself, and don't ever stop doing that. I think it's important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have probably connected. I seen you, and I was like, yeah, like come on now. I love it what you represent, and we need more people to do the work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for bringing me on this amazing platform. I feel very privileged.
Of
Thank you so much.
course. Of course. And tell your friends, and definitely stay connected. I would like to partner up eventually and do something like with Queen
We
Talk
will.
and the art. Like that would be a dope mashup with something. So yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Oh yeah.
Yes, we will definitely stay connected. You guys, what did you guys think of the episode? Ramon definitely expressed a lot. We talked about a lot, y'all. And Wichita, y'all heard a lot about Wichita. Just curious what your thoughts are of the queer scene here, the dynamics that you're in right now. What resiliency are you showing in your life? Let us know. Yeah, make sure to check out queentalk.com. Check out all the good merch that we got going on. And remember, as always, family, friends, strangers, love, and be nice.